Hey team, Lawrence here. Welcome back to another AIRTOC demo. Today we're focusing in on one of the most important tools in monitoring and controlling, the integrated logs and registers. In this lesson, I'll walk you through what integrated logs and registers are, why they are essential for project governance, and how they give project managers a complete real-time view of the project environment. Then we'll move into a live AIRTOC demonstration so you can see exactly how to generate an integrated logs register using the AIMPM project management coach. As always, we like to start with the PMI definition. And according to PMI, integrated logs and registers are project artifacts used to continuously record and update various aspects of the project throughout its life cycle. These include assumptions, constraints, risks, changes, issues, and stakeholder information. This definition is great, but we get a little bit deeper in the weeds with logs and registers that we show you guys. We treat this as the source of truth, and let us explain why in the next few slides. Now, as I stated before, we define integrated logs and registers as a single unified source of truth that captures all of your risks, your issues, your decisions, your change requests, your assumptions, your dependencies, your constraints, and sometimes more. Instead of maintaining separate documents or spreadsheets, this register gives the project manager a 360-degree view of everything impacting the project at any point in time. It's very similar to the IPMP, where you're generating all of these different plans into one executable plan. This gathers all of your different tracking items, like tracking risks and issues and decisions, into one document. It's literally the beating heart of your project. This is the document that gets updated the most outside of maybe your meeting minutes. As things change in the project, so should they change in your logs and registers. And this is how it remains the source of truth. This is the easiest way to track the intricate variables of your project in a single pane of glass. Now, there's a specific way you want to use your logs and registers. You want to use it to centralize information. Make sure you're increasing transparency through it. Provide early warning indicators to your project team through it. It helps strengthen your accountability, and it also supports effective change control when that needs to happen. It keeps you in control as the project manager. And if you do this correctly, it'll become your source of truth. It'll be a real tool for early escalation. It'll be a great way to maintain alignment. And it's really a mechanism for removing blockers, because if I can point these things out early and show the team that we've been tracking this for some time, it puts that much more emphasis on the issue that needs to be solved. Without integrated logs and registers, visibility and context is fragmented. It ends up being stored in multiple different places. Have you ever had to find out who made an important decision a few years ago? I have, and it wasn't a fun experience. If I had something like an integrated logs and register at that time, it would have been a lot easier to find. So make sure you're implementing this into your projects. The logs and registers funnel works just like all the others. What you put in is what you get out. So essentially, if the PM can track all elements of the logs and registers document accurately, it becomes that source of truth for the project stakeholders. That source of truth will maintain alignment across the project team, and good alignment allows you to surface issues early because everyone is on the same page and knows where to look. This helps you remove blockers much more effectively when they do surface, all because people saw the issue coming through clear and accurate documentation. This is a core element of good project management, and that's why logs and registers are so important. Now that you understand what integrated logs and registers are and why they are so essential on projects, let's walk through how to create one with the AIRTOC framework. Let's switch over to the live demo where we'll use the AIMPM project management coach and the AIRTOC framework to create a logs and register. Let's go. Okay, before we dive into the demo, there's a few things that we like to get squared away before we get started. Number one, for the sake of time and simplicity, we'll be using simulated minimal data. In real projects, more than likely, you're going to have a lot more context that goes into these prompts. Number two, even with simplified data, you'll still see how powerful AIRTOC prompts can be. But remember, the more context you add, the better your outputs are going to be. And number three, this process applies to every AIRTOC template in the textbook. The workflow is universal and repeatable across all deliverables. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, as always, before we dive deeper into the demonstration, we always like to give you guys an idea of each component of the demonstration so that you know what's going on along the way. The first piece you see here is the AIRTOC template for integrated logs and registers. This is the same template that you'll find in your AIRTOC library as well as your textbooks. Below that, we have a real-world scenario that we're going to use to feed data into our actual prompt, okay? This is the simulation data that we have here, which is indicated by the red column here, all right? And this is the actual information that is going to come from our scenario. Last but not least, we have our AIMPM project management coach, which is going to be fed the prompt, and then we'll get an output from that once we hit the go button. Ready? Let's take a look. Okay, so starting off with the AIRTOC template for the integrated logs register, everything that you have been seeing before is still here. So you have your AIRTOC framework to the left-hand side, which includes your AI platform, your role, task, and output, as well as your context. Below that, you have AI produces, which is an example of what AI should produce once we feed it the query. All right, so let's start back at the top with the AI platform. Again, we're recommending Gemini or ChatGPT for this query. We're also going to make the role a project manager or a PMO analyst. Our task is to create and register, to collect, organize, and structure records across all project logs to maintain a single consolidated view. The output is an integrated log register summarizing risks, issues, assumptions, constraints, decisions, changes, and lessons learned logs. Okay, so this is the information that we're going to put into our integrated logs and register. Below that, we have our context, which includes input for context, scope, baseline problem and goal, constraints, risks, and stakeholders. And again, this is information that you can grab from your charter, should be readily available if you have a project that's already going. Below that, we have some additional data, which includes risk data, issue data, assumption data, constraint data, decision data, change data, lessons learned data. And again, this is information that may come from outside sources, other documentation, notes, minutes, reports, other things that you have to include into this actual prompt. And again, there's many different ways to get this information in. You can write it up at a high level. You can actually add the report itself by dragging and dropping it into the query. There's a lot of different ways to get this information in. Okay, you can actually copy and paste it into the prompt itself if you need to. Let's take a look at the scenario. Okay, this scenario says, as the workflow automation program entered late stage integration and testing, the PMO identified that risks, issues, decisions, and changes were scattered across Jira, SharePoint, and email, creating governance blind spots. Several dependencies like data migration timing and CR014 approval were not consistently linked across logs, raising concern that impacts were being overlooked. Audit and PMO governance reviews required a single validated source of truth, showing traceability from assumptions, decisions, changes, and outcomes. Inconsistent ownership of logs from the PM, the SME, the vendor lead updating separately created outdated entries and misaligned statuses, increasing the risk of poor decision-making. Governance directed the PM and PMO analysts to produce an integrated logs register to consolidate all logs, risks, issues, assumptions, constraints, decisions, changes, and lessons into a unified master register for weekly reporting. So, high-level requirement is for us to take a bunch of information from a bunch of different places and put it all into an integrated logs and register, which is the purpose of it in the first place. So let's see how we would draft this out into an actual query. Again, our AI platform, role, task, and output remain the same, but now we've added some information for scope. We've added our baseline problem and goal. We've added our constraints. We added our risk. We added our stakeholders, okay? Now we have in some risks data. We have some issue data, assumption data, constraint data, decision data, change data, lessons learned data. Okay, again, this is information that you're going to drag in from other places, but even minimal descriptions like this, right? Assumption data, 14 assumptions, e.g. SME ability, stable vendor APIs, legacy data accessible. We want to make sure that we add a bunch more in, right? We want to make sure we have all of the assumptions here, but you can literally write them into the prompt, right? That's the power of this thing. So let's go ahead and copy this in to our AIMPM project management coach, and let's see what we get here. And again, we're not adding any additional prompts or queries. The AIMPM project management coach knows what to do once it receives an AIRTOC template. All right, so now it's starting to draft it out for us. Integrated master logs register, the purpose, integrated register, and now it's starting to break out some tables for us. Okay, there's a little slider bar here. All right. Number 2, integrated logs and registers, consolidate master table for sample population. All right, now it's starting to break out our risk register for us. And again, it gives us a slider. And these are tables that we can copy and paste into Excel if we need to, right? You have a copy option here. Once this is done populating though, we'll be able to actually download this entire thing in an Excel spreadsheet for us. So yep, it's putting together all of the different registers for us here, right? So we have a risk register, we have an issue register, assumptions, constraints, decision log, change log, and a lessons learned register, right? That was the extent of what we wanted from AI. Now it's breaking out some governance alignment for us, right? Because remember, part of the scenario, people weren't aligned on where things were and what needed to happen. And so we put some governance around this. And then we get a recommended next step, right? So we get a bunch of different options here to essentially turn this into a much more fully functional deliverable. Essentially, they're asking us here, deliver an integrated register as an Excel file, recommended for PMO use. This is probably one of your best options to take from this point. You prompt properly into AI, and these are the type of outputs that you're gonna get. We can definitely copy and paste this into an Excel spreadsheet. If there's more to add to the register, we can add it in. But this gives you an 80 to 90% complete document that you can take forward in your actual project. And remember, it all goes back to your context. As long as your context is very deep and organized, AI will be able to produce outstanding outputs for you. Okay, guys, and that is the power of AIRTOC. Being able to take a very minimal set of information, putting it into an AI that understands what you need to get out of it, and then this is the magic of the output that you'll get. Fully functional documentation that's 80 to 90 to 95% complete that you can move forward in a project. It's going to save you hours and hours and hours of time. Let's go ahead and move on to the next video. I will see you there.